My name is Karim Suleiman, and I am 49 years old. On August 7, 2020, at exactly 4:19 p.m., I was declared clinically dead for 14 minutes. 14 minutes that erased everything I thought I knew. 14 minutes that took the life of a man devoted entirely to Islam and returned someone else entirely. For 21 years, I served as an Islamic scholar and preacher in Amman, Jordan. My reputation was respected, my knowledge sought after, my voice influential. I wasn't just a teacher of Islam, I was a defender of it. I lectured against Christianity, debated Christians publicly, and authored 3 small books refuting the Bible. My identity wasn't just Karim. It was Sheikh Karim Suleiman, a name that carried authority in my community. I was raised in a deeply devout Muslim household. My father was a stern but honorable man who believed sincerity was proven through discipline. My mother was gentle, her voice always reciting Quran as she cooked, cleaned, or prayed. I memorized 10 juz before I turned 13. By 17, I could recite entire surahs with flawless tajweed. I was exactly who my parents wanted me to be, a son saturated in Islam. At 20 years old, I entered the Islamic University of Jordan. Those years shaped me into a scholar obsessed with apologetic. I devoured the works of medieval jurists, memorized arguments refuting Christian theology, and sharpened my debate skills until they were almost surgical. I took pride in dismantling Christian beliefs. The Trinity? Illogical. Jesus as God? Blasphemy. The crucifixion? Fabrication. By the time I turned 28, I became an official preacher at a prominent mosque. Friday after Friday, I faced hundreds of worshippers. Men hung onto my words. Young students studied my notes. Families asked for my rulings on marriage, inheritance, prayer, fasting, and business. I was their guide, their voice of truth, their shield against falsehood, or so I believed. But my attitude toward Christianity was harsh, harsher than most imams. I didn't just disagree with Christians. I pitted them. I believed they followed a corrupted book. I taught my students that Christians worshipped a man instead of God. I preached that their Bible had been changed over centuries, manipulated by councils and kings. I saw myself as Islam's defender against their errors. Everything changed on July 30, 2020, 1 week before my death. 3 Christian volunteers arrived in our neighborhood from a local Jordanian church. They set up a free medical clinic for low-income families. People welcomed them warmly, too warmly, in my opinion. I warned my congregation that these people had hidden motives. They came with smiles, but their goal was conversion. I felt a responsibility to protect my community. One evening, a group of young men from my mosque told me they attended one of the clinic's gatherings. They said the Christians didn't argue. They simply spoke about the love of Jesus, forgiveness, peace. I grew angry. How dare they influence my people? How dare they speak the name of Jesus with such confidence, as though they knew him personally? You must confront them, Sheikh Karim, one of the elders told me. Yes, I said. I will correct their errors publicly. For the next several days, I prepared for the confrontation. I studied their scriptures, reviewed my notes on textual criticism, memorized arguments against the Trinity, the divinity of Christ, the crucifixion, salvation by grace, all of it. I even practiced my tone, ensuring I sounded authoritative and unshakable. On August 6th, the night before it happened, I prayed a long prayer, asking Allah to give me victory. I believed I was fighting for truth. I believed I was the guardian of God's honor. But all it took was 14 minutes of death to show me how wrong I was. The next day, the day I died, began like any ordinary Friday, but it would end with everything I believed collapsing in an instant. August 7th, 2020, began with the same rhythm as every other Friday of my life. I rose before dawn, washed, prayed far, and prepared myself for the sermon I would deliver later that afternoon. I had crafted it with unusual boldness, a message warning Muslims to guard themselves against Christian influence. I was determined to expose what I believed to be the illusions of their faith. That morning, as I walked through the mosque courtyard, several young students approached me with admiration shining in their eyes. Sheikh Karim, we heard you're debating those Christians today. May Allah give you victory, Sheikh. You will silence them. Their confidence inflated mine. I felt untouchable. I felt prepared. I felt righteous. By midday, the atmosphere in the mosque was charged. People whispered about the upcoming confrontation. Some came early for the sermon just to secure seats. The women's section filled quickly. Men squeezed into every corner. Even the corridors overflowed. I stood before them all, my robe perfectly pressed, my voice steady, my heart burning with certainty. I delivered one of the sharpest sermons of my life. I denounced Christian doctrine openly. I called their scriptures corrupted. I called their faith misguidance. I urged Muslims to avoid them completely. When the sermon ended, the crowd erupted in approval. Men embraced me. Young boys kissed my hand. Old men prayed blessings over me. And I, lost in pride, soaked it all in. At 3:52 p.m., I left the mosque to head to the community center where the Christian volunteers had invited local families for a small gathering. I planned to walk in unannounced, challenge them publicly, embarrass them, and leave victorious. I imagined Muslims cheering for me in the streets. I imagined my sermon spreading across social media. But life never warned me that death was only minutes away. The streets of Amman were warm and busy. Traffic moved slowly. People bustled between shops, smiling, bargaining, living their ordinary lives. I drove with confidence, rehearsing my arguments in my head. Then, halfway through a major intersection, I saw a truck lose control. I didn't hear it at first. I only saw the blur, metal shining violently in the sun. People on sidewalks screamed and scattered. For a split second, everything slowed. The truck's tires screeched. The air trembled. My chest tightened. Then it hit me. The sound was catastrophic. Metal crunched like dry bone. Glass exploded. My body was thrown sideways, slammed against the door. The steering wheel crushed into my ribs. My head struck the window. Everything inside me felt like it was breaking. I tried to breathe, I couldn't. I tried to move, nothing responded. Pain surged through my spine, spreading like fire. The world tilted and spun and folded into itself. People rushed toward the wreck. I saw them through dimming vision. Blurred silhouettes running, shouting, crying for help. Someone tried to pull the door. Another screamed for the ambulance. Their voices grew distant, then muffled, then silent. A heavy, unnatural cold wrapped around my body. My hearing disappeared. My breath vanished. My pulse slipped away. I felt myself fall not through space, but through existence. Then the darkness swallowed me whole. I didn't see lights. I didn't see angels. I didn't see anything familiar from the faith I had devoted my life to. Instead, I entered a silence so deep it felt alive. A stillness that stripped me of everything. My name, my titles, my knowledge, my pride. I knew I was dead. Not unconscious. Not dreaming. Dead. Everything I had ever believed was about to be confronted. Everything I taught would crumble. Everything I defended would be challenged. And the one who met me there was not the one I expected. Not even close. I do not know how long I remained in that strange silent darkness. It felt like time did not exist, like everything I once depended on. My heartbeat, my breath, my senses had been stripped away. I was aware but not alive. Awake, but not present in any physical world. There was no pain, no body, no sound. Only a thick, heavy emptiness pressing against me from every direction, as though the darkness itself was studying me, searching me, unveiling parts of me I never wanted to face. In that moment, I realized how fragile my confidence had been. All the knowledge I carried, all the titles, the debates, the pride, none of it followed me here. None of it mattered. I was simply a consciousness standing in front of the truth, naked and exposed in a way I had never experienced before. Then something changed. The darkness around me began to tremble, vibrating softly like a distant drum. It wasn't a sound but a sensation. Waves passing through the emptiness, moving everything without touching anything. I felt a pull, not physical but undeniable. And then, far ahead, a point of light appeared. At first, it was just a tiny speck, like a star in a moonless sky. But as I watched, the light grew brighter, wider, stronger, until the darkness around me shivered and slowly peeled away, unable to stay in its presence. The light came closer, or perhaps I was being drawn toward it. I had no feet, yet I moved. I had no breath, yet something inside me tightened. I had no heartbeat, yet I felt one pounding somewhere deep in a place no body could reach. As the light expanded, I felt warmth, gentle at first, then overwhelming. It was a warmth that didn't touch my skin because I had no skin. It touched me somewhere deeper, reaching inside my thoughts, my memories, my fears. It was as though every secret I had ever buried was suddenly lifted to the surface. Every doubt I suppressed, every anger I justified, every pride I carried like armor. Nothing remained hidden. I wanted to turn away, but I couldn't. The light held me still. Then I saw him. A figure stepped forward from within the brightness, not emerging from the light, but appearing as though he was the light, the source, the center, the heart of it. The brightness around him was so intense that I should not have been able to look directly at him. Yet I could, and not only could I look, I couldn't look away. He was radiant in a way no human language can describe. His face carried a purity that pierced me, a strength that humbled me, and a gentleness that made my entire being break open. His presence did not crush me. It consumed every lie I had ever told myself. He took one step closer, and when he did, the entire atmosphere shifted. The weight of truth deepened. The warmth intensified. And then he called my name. Not loudly, not sharply, not with force. He said it softly, like someone who had always known me. Kareem. My name echoed through me, vibrating through every memory, every thought, every part of my existence. It wasn't just a sound, it was recognition. It was ownership. It was love. I knew instantly that this man knew me more deeply than I had ever known myself. He knew my past, my pride, my mistakes, my arguments, my doubts. He knew the things I confessed and the things I never dared whisper even in prayer. For a terrifying moment, I believed this was an angel testing me, or worse, a hallucination of a dying mind. But the peace in his voice silenced every defense I tried to raise within myself. The moment he said my name, I knew, without being told, that this was no prophet, no angel, no messenger. I knew exactly who he was, and that knowledge shattered everything I had built my life on. My heart, though I had none, felt like it cracked open. I whispered inside myself, "This cannot be." But something deeper answered, "You have always known." The man stepped closer. The light around him glowed brighter. My soul trembled in awe. And then he spoke again, this time with a voice that was gentle yet carried the authority of eternity. "I am the one you did not believe in, but I have always believed in you." And just like that, everything I thought I knew about life, death, faith, and truth collapsed in a single breathless moment. The moment he spoke those words, "I am the one you did not believe in, but I have always believed in you," something inside me collapsed. It wasn't fear. It wasn't shame. It was something deeper, something I had never felt before. Truth touching me directly, without argument, without defense, without any place left to hide. In all my years of preaching, debating, teaching, I had never encountered truth like this, truth that didn't need to be proven, truth that didn't demand submission, truth that simply was. I wanted to deny him. My mind screamed for explanations. My training told me this was impossible, contradictory, blasphemous. But my soul knew exactly who he was. He stood before me, his presence both overwhelming and comforting. His eyes, if they can be called eyes, held a depth that made me feel seen in a way I had never been seen by anyone. Not my teachers, not my parents, not my students, not even myself. His gaze reached layers of my being I didn't know existed. It was not the gaze of a judge, nor the glare of a ruler. It was the steady, unwavering look of someone who had loved me long before I was born. As he stepped closer, the light surrounding him softened, not to make himself less powerful, but to make me able to bear his presence. And then something happened that tore every argument I had ever carried apart. He lifted his hands. At first, I didn't fully understand what I was seeing. The brightness made his palms glow like burning gold. But as the light shifted slightly, I saw the marks. Deep, circular, piercing. Not exaggerated, not symbolic, not hazy or unclear, real wounds. Wounds that should have leaked blood. Wounds that should have caused unimaginable pain. But instead, they radiated a beauty and gravity that struck me deeper than any sermon I had ever preached. My entire being froze. His hands had holes. Not scars. Holes. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The sight of those wounds cracked something in me that had been solid for decades. Every argument against the crucifixion dissolved. Every claim that he had never died faded. Every doctrine I built my life upon collapsed like sand under a wave. These were not the wounds of a prophet. These were not the wounds of a teacher. These were the wounds of the one who died. And then he said the words that shattered me completely. For you too. I don't know how a soul collapses, but mine did. I felt something within me crumble. My pride, my certainty, my resistance. I felt naked, exposed, undone. Not by force, but by love. A love so immense, so personal, so precise, that it terrified me more than death itself. I whispered, though I had no voice, "Lord, is it you?" And the answer came, not with thunder, not with fire, but with the steady, undeniable gentleness of eternity. I am he. My entire existence trembled. He extended his hand toward me, and when he did, something like a wave of life, warmth, and overwhelming truth surged through me. Not the warmth of fire, but the warmth of mercy. The warmth of being forgiven before I even confessed. The warmth of someone who knows everything about you and still chooses you. You fought against me, he said. You denied me. You spoke against my people. You taught many to turn their hearts away. I expected condemnation. I expected anger. I expected rejection. Instead, he stepped closer, so close that the light around him wrapped me like a cloak. But I loved you, he said. Even then, every barrier inside me broke. How could this be? How could he love someone who spent decades arguing that he was a lie? How could he extend mercy to someone who denied his very existence? How could he offer grace where I deserved judgment? I tried to fall, but I had no body. I tried to kneel, but there was no ground. All I could do was collapse inwardly, overwhelmed, undone. His hands, those wounded, glorious hands, reached toward me, and the closer they came, the deeper the truth pierced through me. I wasn't standing before a prophet. I wasn't standing before a messenger. I wasn't standing before a vision. I was standing before the one I spent my whole life rejecting, and he still called my name. Everything within me felt as though it had dissolved into the overwhelming presence standing before me. I no longer felt separate from the truth. I was inside it, surrounded by it, flooded by it. Every part of my existence that once resisted him was now reduced to trembling silence. His hands were still extended toward me, glowing with the kind of purity that could cleanse wounds I did not even know I carried. The marks in his palms were not merely signs of suffering. They were invitations. Invitations into a love that transcended every boundary I had built between us. And as his light wrapped around me, I realized that what I had always feared was not his judgment. It was his love. Because love like this demanded honesty. Love like this demanded surrender. Kareem, he said again, his voice flowing through me like living water. Will you let me give you what you have never found in all your years of searching? His question cut deeper than any theological debate I had ever engaged in. I had spent a lifetime studying religion, reciting prayers, memorizing scripture, debating doctrines, earning titles, all in the hope of pleasing God. And yet, in this moment, standing before the one I denied, I felt the weight of how empty my efforts had been. Not because they were worthless, but because they were rooted in self-righteousness, not love. Performance, not relationship. Fear, not faith. I wanted to answer him. I wanted to say yes. But before I could, a sudden heaviness filled the space. a heaviness not from him, but from within me. It felt like the accumulated guilt of decades rising to the surface. Every argument I made against him, every sermon I preached rejecting him, every mocking thought, every moment I encouraged others to avoid him, the weight of my own hostility pressed on me like a crushing stone. And then, just as I thought I would crumble under it, he stepped even closer. The light intensified, the warmth deepened, and with a tenderness that unraveled me completely, he whispered, "I carried that weight for you." I broke. Not physically, because I had no body, but spiritually, emotionally, completely. I collapsed in the only way a soul can collapse, by surrendering every pretense, every argument, every defense. I felt myself melt into him, not merging, but yielding, as though my entire identity had been placed into his hands. And for the first time in my life, I knew what it meant to be loved unconditionally. Then something unexpected happened. A sound, faint and distant, began to echo through the space. It was muffled, rhythmic, pulsating like footsteps, but not footsteps, like something striking, then retreating, then striking again. A slow, persistent beat. I didn't understand it at first. I thought it was part of the experience, part of the otherworldly realm I was in. But the sound grew louder, more defined, more familiar. A heartbeat, then another, then a rush of warmth, followed by a pull, gentle but firm, like an unseen force tugging me backward. "No," I whispered within myself. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to return to a world that felt so small compared to the magnitude of what I had seen. I didn't want to return to a body that felt like a prison after tasting this freedom. But he spoke again, and his words carried the weight of purpose. "You must return. I am not finished with you." The pull intensified. The light began to fade. The space around me dissolved. His presence remained, but the brightness dimmed. And the last thing I heard before I was thrust back into the world was, "Live for me." A violent jolt surged through me, like fire poured into my chest. My eyes burst open. Pain flooded every nerve. People screamed around me. Hands pressed on my chest. Someone shouted, "He's back! He's breathing!" The bright hospital lights blinded me. My body trembled uncontrollably. I gasped for air like a man emerging from deep water. I had returned, but I was not the same. For weeks, I couldn't speak without breaking down. Every night I saw his face. Every morning, I woke with the echoes of his words. Doctors called it trauma. My family called it a miracle. But I knew, without question, that it was truth. It was salvation. It was the beginning of a life I never imagined I would live. And the greatest miracle wasn't that I came back to life. The miracle was that I came back reborn. When the chaos of my resurrection settled and the hospital room returned to its quiet rhythm, I found myself staring at the ceiling in a kind of disbelief that no language could articulate. I had returned to the world, yes. I was breathing again, yes. But the life I returned with was not the life I had left behind. Everything familiar felt foreign, and everything foreign felt familiar. I could still feel him, his presence, his voice, his warmth, like a spiritual imprint embedded deep inside me. I carried him the way a healed wound carries the memory of pain. But in my case, it was the memory of love. Family, friends, nurses, even strangers, kept asking the same question. What happened to you? But how do you explain eternity to people who live in minutes? How do you explain divine presence to people trapped in logic? How do you explain being held by God to people who think God is a metaphor? For days I said nothing, not because I was afraid, but because I was overwhelmed. My thoughts were loud, but my voice was weak, like a newborn adjusting to an unfamiliar world. Every breath felt like an assignment. Every moment felt like a message. I realized something profound. I had not simply survived. I had been sent back with purpose. While I recovered, I kept revisiting the final moment with him, the light, the words, the command, "Live for me." Those 3 words became the compass of my new life. They echoed through my mind at every quiet hour. They shaped the way I began to see everything. My past, my present, even my pain. And for the first time in years, I was not afraid of living. I was afraid of wasting the life that had been given back to me. When I finally left the hospital, the world looked different. The colors seemed brighter. The air felt lighter. Even the noise of the city sounded like music. I could see beauty in simple things, the kind of beauty I never saw before. A sunrise, a quiet street, the laughter of children, the feel of rain on my hands. These were no longer ordinary things. They were proof that life, even in its smallest form, was a miracle. But the biggest change was internal. The addictions that held me for years, the compulsions, the obsessions, the emotional deadness were gone. Not fought, not managed, gone. I experienced freedom, not like a person who escaped prison, but like a person who had been resurrected into a new form of existence. The emptiness I lived with for so long had been replaced with peace. Deep peace, the kind that does not come from self-control but from surrender. I knew what I had to do. I had to speak. I had to share what happened, not to convince anyone, but to obey the one who sent me back. And so, trembling but determined, I began telling my story. First to my family, then a few friends, then eventually to a small prayer group. Some people believed me. Some doubted me. Some were moved to tears. Others questioned my sanity. But I learned quickly that reactions didn't matter. Obedience did. Months passed, and something incredible happened. My testimony started spreading, quietly at first, then faster, then unexpectedly wide. People began reaching out. Some were broken, desperate for hope. Some were silent sufferers seeking reassurance that God still sees them. Others were skeptics whose hearts softened after hearing my encounter. And through every testimony I gave, I could feel him near, guiding, whispering, strengthening. My life rebuilt itself in ways I never expected. Not around achievements, but around purpose. Not around fear, but around faith. Not around my past, but around the one who rewrote my future. I found love, real love. I found stability. I found peace with myself and peace with God. I became a spouse, a parent, a storyteller, a witness to mercy. And now, standing at this point in my life, I understand something I never understood before. God does not just save lives, He transforms them. He does not just heal wounds, He rewrites stories. He does not just forgive, He restores, redirects, resurrects. My life is proof that no one is too broken, too addicted, too far, too guilty, too lost, or too damaged for Him to reach. If He could touch me, the one who doubted Him, resisted Him, and fought against Him, He can touch anyone. And that is why I share this. Not to glorify myself, not to brag about survival, but to declare one truth. God still saves. God still speaks. God still heals. God still loves. And I am living proof of that.